Hi there, it's Dr. Bernstein, and this video is the second in a two-part series on resumes. More specifically, a series that is designed to introduce you to two new ways of thinking about and using your resume. So if you haven't seen the first video, I recommend that you go check it out right now. The link to it is right underneath this video. And because that video really talks about the general framework about why it's important to think about your resume, not just as something for other people, but also for yourself, for your own professional growth, and also for thinking about your resume not just as a record of past experiences, but as a guide to figuring out the next steps you should be taking in your career. But, giving advice is really easy and it makes things sound very simple. But sometimes, it's a lot more complex when you're trying to put it into practice for yourself. So I thought it'd be really helpful for you to see how I helped one of my clients work through that advice and apply it in his own life. So this client, his name's Marshall. He was a recent college graduate and he had a job, but he was what you would call underemployed. His job was pretty low level. He didn't have a chance. There wasn't any opportunities to grow within the organization, and he wasn't acquiring the kind of skills and experiences that would enable him to get a better job elsewhere. And of course, on top of it all, he wasn't being paid enough. And I bring this up because more and more college graduates are finding themselves in this position of being underemployed. So when you're listening to Marshall's story and thinking about and learning about how he emerged out of this situation, my hope is that you can use some of these own strategies in case you find yourself in this situation. Which you might. Even the smartest, brightest students are finding themselves in these situations. So the very first thing we did when we started working together was look at his resume. Now, Marshall had followed all of the, traditional rules that you find in all the resume how-to guidebooks and online, and used a template that, came with his word processing unit. And you know what? He sounded really boring. The resume was really flat. It didn't convey Marshall. And I happened to know Marshall from previous work experience. So it didn't convey who he was. It didn't convey his passion and his knowledge for the microbrew, craft beer, and specialty wine industries. Now, part of that is because in his other jobs within the restaurant industry, he didn't have an official beverage related title. So it was sort of buried underneath the details of his jobs in that field. And on top of it, his resume, his experiences didn't seem to hang together. He had, on the one hand, some experience within the restaurant industry. On the other hand, he had a lot of experience doing missionary work in Costa Rica, primarily doing construction work. I was like, how do these two things hang together? It's like almost two different people here. And so I could understand how a potential employer would just be like, I don't know why I should hire you when there are other people who seem qualified. It's just not clear how these things fit together, how they would benefit him in this the beer and wine distributing industry. So instead of starting with the problem, some people like to start with the problem, but really what we need to do is get to the root of things. And so instead of starting with the problem, we started with his passion. And we had a series of really interesting conversations about what it was he found so fascinating about the craft beer and specialty wine communities. And as it turns out, what Marshall was most moved by was the dynamic communities that grew up in relationship to these special beers and wines. He's really interested in that sort of dynamic interaction between aficionados. And that was interesting. And then as we started talking more and more about his experiences and what really meant the most to him about his work and missionary experiences, well, it turns out that Marshall, the construction work that he was doing in Costa Rica, he enjoyed that. But what he really enjoyed and what impressed him the most was meeting new people from different backgrounds and collaborating with them, working with them, developing a sense of community. So suddenly, things that on the surface seem very different, working as a server in a restaurant and working in Costa Rica doing construction work, seem totally different. But underneath it, it turns out that really what he's most passionate about is a sense of community and these quirky communities that emerged in relationship to these projects. And so already we started seeing like, okay, this is starting to hang together. But before we went into revising his resume, we also looked at current openings within the distributing industry. That's what he wanted to get into at the time. His dream job was to work for a distributor. And even though he wasn't applying for one of the positions, we wanted to get a sense from a variety of different distributors what are particular skills and experiences he would need in order to be qualified for those positions. So you can see how it's really great to work on your resume and to maybe sometimes work with a career expert before you're looking for a job, because sometimes you need time to get the experience you need to be the best candidate for the job. So we made a list of the skills and experiences that he should acquire. And then we started revamping his resume. We started changing the descriptions of what he did when he was working at the restaurant. So it wasn't just serving. He included that. That was part of his work. But it was also interacting with customers and talking with them to find the best ways to pair their meals with drinks, whether they were beers or wines. So getting some of that experience that he was undermining and sort of neglecting, getting that into his resume. Talking about his experience in Costa Rica, mentioning the construction work, but also talking about the collaborative social engagement that he had in terms of building up a sense of community there. And we also created an overview for his resume. Some people put an objective at the top of their resume, but for the most part, it's like, I want a job that will enable me to use my education. It's like, yeah, so would almost everyone else. You want something that's going to distinguish you. And for Marshall, I thought it was really important to have a very brief overview, maybe like 2 or 3 lines at the very top of his resume that talks about his passion for the community, the culture of the beer and wine industry, and how that relates to his previous experience and where he wants to go in life. Very brief, very encapsulated, but have that there so it's the first thing that someone encounters in his resume. And then what we started doing is getting him to take the steps that would help him acquire the experience that he needed to get in order to apply for these jobs. So there was a big food and wine festival, so he volunteered there doing wine-related volunteer work. And then he had gone to different festivals before, beer festivals, but mainly as a participant. Now he's going more as a professional and networking with other aficionados. He had a business card designed, and he really started networking. And step by step, along the way, updating his resume, and step by step, he was moving in the right direction. He got a job at a better restaurant and in a better position that enabled him to really work with the distributors who were coming into the restaurant, choosing the wine and beer list, that kind of work. And that wasn't his ideal job, but that was a step in the right direction. And then now he's a manager at an up-and-coming restaurant in South Carolina. So now he's acquiring more of the managerial type skills that he would need to get into a higher level distributing position, if in fact it turns out that's what he still wants to do. So it's not a neat, always fast process. Sometimes it takes time. And so what I want you to really do is take away a few key things from Marshall's experience. And that is, first and foremost, allowing yourself to think of your career, to even think about the process of getting your foot in the door of your desired field, because that's becoming even harder. I want you to let yourself think of that as a process that occurs over time. It might not happen the first shot with your first job, but you want to think of it as a process. So even if you're at a job that you don't like, that is keeping you underemployed, you can still keep your big goal, your big picture in mind, and keep taking the actions that will move you towards it. And, look at your resume and think about, are these the experiences that I want to represent me? If yes, think about how you can keep cultivating them, keep taking them to the next level. If no, well, think about what can you do? What experiences do you want on there? And how can you take the steps that will get those experiences on there? And um, mainly don't feel bad. Don't feel bad if you need help, because this sounds, even though I'm giving you the example of Marshall, I worked with him intensely back and forth for quite some time. Don't feel bad if you need to ask for help. If you're out of college, it might be possible for you to set up a one-on-one session with one of the people in the career services department or office. Sometimes people in those offices that have such a huge workload that they can't work with people one-on-one, you could also get what's known as a career coach. That's what I do. And sometimes just one session can bring about major breakthroughs, and you just know what you need to do. Some people need a couple of sessions. It's really, really depends on where you're at and who you are. But don't feel bad about asking for help. And, you might have to make a small investment. You might have to spend $100 to get that advice. And I remember what it's like, to be very, very close to the bone budget-wise. But sometimes that small investment can make a huge payoff and save you years of sort of spinning your wheels. So, that's it for now. If you like what you're learning about in this video, please think about signing up for my totally free e-newsletter. It's called The Path. It's designed to help you take control of your career one step at a time. And you can easily get on that list by going to my website, www.jenniferbbernstein.com. That's where you can fill out the form. And if you're interested, you're ready to take action and work with a coach, you can go over to my academic and career coaching page to check out my services. So that's it for now. Take care. Bye.